brands see that every day, and they're on the front lines of interacting with people who are not going to, accept a clunky user experience. And so then the cycle happens of brands enforcing that with technology providers to create new products that are easy to use. And I think it's a really interesting cycle that gets created when large brands enter the space.
Welcome to Netcetera, the official podcast and newsletter powered by Myosin.xyz, the ultimate marketing network. I'm Blake Minho Kim, co-founder of Myosin.xyz, and join me as each week I talk to leaders working at the forefront of innovation, whether they're at traditional brands, Web3 or AI companies, or otherwise, to demystify the latest and emerging tech that's shaping the new internet for a brighter future. Today, we'll be speaking with Alex Webbs, innovation co-lead at Myosin.xyz and a member of the digital strategy team at PUMA, a leading brand in the world of culture and sports. Alex is a deeply experienced marketer in the world of Web3, tech, and culture, having consulted for clients such as Shiseido, Water & Music, NFT.NYC, Ready Player Me, and many more. If you're interested in learning about how brands think about Web3 and innovation, this is a great listen. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here's episode number 1 with Alex Webbs. All right. Thanks for hopping on and chatting with us, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Blake? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're really excited to chat. I feel like this has been a long time coming, so really excited to dive into it. We always love to start with a good origin story. So to get things started, can you tell us a bit more about your journey and how you got to this intersection of Web3, marketing, emerging tech? Tell us your story.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess initially that what planted the seed for me getting into crypto in the first place was in high school. Myself and some friends wanted to get fake IDs, and we actually used the Silk Road or some similar service back then that only accepted Bitcoin, but had no idea what it was going to become, and didn't view it as an investment, and didn't hold on to it, of course. But that definitely planted the seed, at least for the possibilities of what this thing is. It allowed me to recognize it again in late 2016, 2017, as I was starting my career in sales and enterprise SaaS, and started to hear more about crypto, and got involved with my local community. Started to going to meetups, went to the MIT Bitcoin Expo, which is really what excited me. And then started lurking on crypto Twitter all the time for the next few years until I started doing some side work for early stage crypto companies, helping with partnerships and go to market strategy, and then working with some larger brands on that same sort of stuff. And then during that time, decided to go full time, and and at that time also found Myosin, where I'm now innovation guild lead, and that's been great. And then more recently, I joined PUMA full time, helping to lead our Web3 efforts there.
I love that. And it's a tale as old as time, right? We start with crypto because we need to use it for something, and then we end up falling down the rabbit hole, and then next thing you know, you're working in it full time. That's awesome.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's a similar story for a lot of people where it starts out part time,
Yeah.
and then you kind of find your footing. For me, I met a few great people, and the sort of the inbound for that side work became quite a bit, to the point where I was lucky enough to be able to to quit my full time job in enterprise SaaS and go full time crypto a couple years back. Never looking back, I guess.
There you go. Never looking back. And that's the dream, right? That's what so many people, I think, maybe now in the bear market, not quite so sure, but generally speaking, that's what we all want. I'm still happy, and I think you're still happy to be here. So building off of that, right? We'd love to understand, we'll dive into Myosin in a little bit, but kind of taking it down to brass tacks, we'd love to dive into what you're doing with the Web3 team at PUMA, or at least your perspectives as someone who works on that team. So obviously right now, I think a lot of retail brands and brands in general are starting to think about Web3, but we'd love to hear from your point of view, why are brands like PUMA and other retail brands and other brands outside of retail entering this space? What are the benefits, and why are they so excited, or why are they exploring?
Yeah. I mean, it's an absolute no brainer for like consumer facing brands to enter the Web3 space. There are so many benefits that we've seen already, and things that are yet to be seen. Um, but the ability to connect with your community and build community and connect with your consumers in a more direct and one-to-one way is something that's like unmatched in Web3. That's really really difficult to achieve with traditional methods. um, the saying "do things that don't scale" really really applies to large traditional brands entering Web3 and building NFT communities and showing up and being authentic and providing value in a really unique way, with engagement levels that again are hard to be found in Web2.
I love it. I love it. And I'd love to hear a bit more about more specifically, like with Puma, right? Even until you joined, I didn't quite realize how deep into the ecosystem that they have been getting. But once I started to do some research, I was pretty impressed with all the stuff you guys have been up to. So I know it's a pretty expansive and chaotic universe, but to the best of your abilities, like how would you summarize the world that Puma is building in terms of Web3 and crypto and all that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The priority and mindset has always been like to test and learn, try new things, experiment with new things, and enter the space authentically, and try to innovate. Right. So Puma's entrance into Web3 started with buying the Puma.eth ENS, which started to raise some eyebrows from different people in the community, wondering what is Puma going to do, and then followed by a purchase of a few cat-related, cat-themed NFTs like gutter cats and cool cats, just kind of more strongly signifying like, hey, we're looking at the space, we're gonna do something. And then a handful of collaborations thereafter. But the primary activations have been Puma's two owned and operated NFTs, which have been the more story and lore IP driven Super Puma NFT project. Super Puma is actually an old comic book character from the 70s that Puma created when they made Super Puma and this comic book, this actual real physical comic book. Um, and it was just like a perfect match to bring back that character of Super Puma for a PFP project. So that's kind of like the origin story of that. It comes from real roots, and we've since done comic books again that have spun out of that. And then the other owned and operated NFT project that Puma has put out is what was called Nitro, which is now the Puma Pass, which is more of a product driven membership NFT, which is focused again around like Puma physical product and early access, exclusive access, things like that.
I love that. And I think that really kind of drills, like hits on this point of, I think, especially for people who aren't as deep into this as some of us might be, right? There's this whole misconception around the term NFT. And I love the idea of, you guys are actually creating something of value. You're working from a brand perspective. Could you tell me a bit more just about, like, with Puma Pass, for example, right? Like, how does that generally work, right? If you're a member, right? Like, how is that really facilitating what we're just talking about, which is that kind of more one-to-one relationship between brand and consumer, co-creation, whatever it is? Like, how are you guys bringing that to life? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think in a similar way to how you'll see other retail or apparel brands enter this space with sort of prioritizing utility with these NFTs. So folks who purchased the Puma Pass previously have received physical product like shoes. Our most recent drop we did was in collaboration with Gutter Cat Gang and LaMelo Ball to create the Gutter Mellow sneaker, which is this really out there, awesome, crazy basketball sneaker that fans got really hyped about. I mentioned that I just was at a blockchain conference last week and saw some people actually wearing them there, which is really, really cool to see. So that's definitely a way trying to benefit holders with physical product and digital goods, digital benefits as well. But like the unlock that you are able to get with NFTs and community like that is really unique. Like being able to have interoperability, which is something we talk a lot about in blockchain, like the technical interoperability. You're also able to achieve community interoperability. So, like I said, we did this last drop with Gutter Cat Gang and Lamelo Ball and Puma, and so you're able to see this like convergence of different communities being aware of each other for for the first times, or becoming members of each other's community for the first time. We're able to attract and benefit Gutter Cat Gang NFT holders and have them learn about Puma and Puma brand and Puma NFTs, and likewise, Puma NFT holders are finding out about Gutter Cat Gangs, and maybe now they want to engage in that community. And you're getting the Lamelo Ball fans who are becoming aware of these two communities, and all vice versa. And so, that community interoperability is something unique to Web3, I think.
That's super cool. Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing, right? In the chaos of today's world, is like being able to just cross pollinate people with similar interests, because we're all complicated, right? We don't like only one thing. So you like this thing, there's a clustering effect that happens. So being able to do that is really important. So I really love that. I really love that. Building on top of everything you just talked about, right? In terms of the cool stuff that you guys are doing with Puma Pass and and all of it, right? And Super Puma. Would love to better understand, from your point of view, from your time there, but also just in general, right? What are some of the biggest lessons and learnings for, what works well for enterprise brands that want to enter the space, that want to try and enter Web3, and getting as tactical as possible would be great, but it's up to you on how deep you want to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that brands can learn and be aware of before entering this space is to just prioritize authenticity, and have a real fundamental understanding of why you're entering the space, and try to make that reason as authentic as possible, and really having the consumer in mind, having uh, thought for and empathy for the consumer, and really wanting to delight them. And if you have that as your priority and you're using Web3 to do that, I think you're going about this space in the right way for sure. And then also being comfortable with trying new things, and innovating, and taking risks while being authentic.
I love it. I love it. Any crazy battle stories or war stories that you want to share, or are able to, I guess, but it's up to you.
No, not that I can think of, but I mean, I think you're well aware as well. If you've been in this space for a little while, we've all seen large brands that don't enter uh, Web3 authentically, and it comes off so clear. Like you don't need to be crypto native as a brand necessarily at all to enter the space, but real recognize real, I guess.
There we go. Yeah, real recognize real. Just got to watch out.
No, I mean, and no one specific even comes to mind, but I think we're all familiar with that feeling or idea of whether it's brands or like large personas who are actually Web3 native people entering the space in ways that are not authentic and that feel parasitic, maybe, or just not aligned with the values of the communities that they're trying to engage with. It's very clear.
I love it. I love it. And then I'm curious, like, thinking about industries, right? So retail is obviously, I think, a big value add, but this actually, in my mind, actually ties back to this idea that we've at least coined here at Myosin, and we've talked about it pretty extensively, this idea of direct to community. Um, would love to hear kind of in your own words what that really means, and well, maybe let's start there. Like, what does that mean to you in terms of direct to community and how that applies to brands and enterprise? So we start there.
Yeah, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, and when we talked about some of the benefits for brands entering the Web3 space, but really, again, like having that one-to-one relationship with community members, and going back to the phrase "do things that don't scale." I think that brands entering Web3 is a perfect example of doing just that, having like more curated and intentional experiences with their audience, where they can really have a lot more impact, a lot more connection with those people.
Yeah, owning that relationship, right? Customer retention, loyalty, all these things. Um, Yeah. How do you think about outside of retail, right? Because obviously that's kind of where you're sitting today, but um, maybe with Innovation Guild and the stuff you're doing there as well, right? Like, what are some of the other industries that you think there's some pretty big, I guess, applications or use cases that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think really anything, and we've spoken about this, but anything like culture related, I think there's tons of opportunity and tons of benefits for Web3 to play a role there. So anything from retail and apparel to luxury goods, sports, gaming, and then also industries that's really rely heavily on or benefit from traditional memberships and loyalty programs. So travel and hospitality are things that you and I have spoken about as well that could stand to benefit from some of these tokenized communities.
I love that. I would love to just let's do a bit of jamming. Like, I don't know, like with tokenized loyalty, where do you think that's all headed? Because right, I think the challenge is there's so many of these players now, so it's a bit of a question of, who's going to win? How are they going to win? Is it just an arms race? Is it a gold rush right now, and then we're just going to see what happens in the next 5 years? Or I'm curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of great platforms and tooling that are doing great work to try to help enable tokenized communities for loyalty purposes. And yeah, it will be interesting to see where that all goes. If it ends up being like a platform versus platform thing, or if you see brands build their own thing in house. Um, yeah, really not sure what that'll end up looking like. But what I do know is that brands will continue to explore that space for sure of tokenized loyalty. It just, I mean, it makes so much sense for all the reasons why you'd want a membership or loyalty program in the first place. Web3 it just enables so much greater connection there, and also just a ton more possibility and like a collaboration with other brands. The whole aspect of interoperable loyalty cross brand is huge in and of itself.
I'm so excited for that. It'll be like like with airline points, there's Star Alliance with the airlines, but it's like, what if you had Star Alliance for everything?
Yeah. I mean, you are seeing um, some large brands attempting to get see the benefits of cross brand loyalty, but those sort of partnerships take a long time to form from like just a business and partnership perspective, and also from like a technical lift. They're costly and they take a long time, but it makes sense to have those crossovers, like being able to use your points from Uber and have them apply to Delta or whatever the partnership may be. There's so much opportunity there, and that opportunity is so much easier to unlock when those points are represented by tokens. If we're all on the same common base layer, um, i.e., a blockchain, then brands can easily accept each other's points.
Yeah, and that's what gets me excited. But then there's I think this you know, and I'm just having fun here, right? But just like going back and forth on like the realities and the ideas, right? Is something that does concern me sometimes is like what blockchain are these points on? And then also I think what we're seeing, because like, if someone's on Polygon, this person's on Avalanche and this person's on Arbitrum, like the cross chain compatibility, like even if they're EVM compatible might be a bit challenging. But I think there's also this question of like, do we well, because at least from what I've seen, right? Like, I think the Starbucks like Polygon activation, like you can't really trade those with a different, or you can't. It's not interoperable yet, right? So I'm curious to get your take on, do we think that's something that's gonna change in the coming months? Do we think, um, some people are just going to be siloed off and then they'll eventually open up when other people start participating? I'm just curious to get your hot take on that.
Yeah. I'm actually not sure what the mechanism looks like with their loyalty program, but I think those definitely are design choices that need to be made. Like, do you want your loyalty tokens to be non-transferable tokens, or do you want them to be like more traditional NFTs? And what are the implications of that? It's like, what sort of behavior are you incentivizing or are you allowing? And it definitely takes a lot of foresight from these brands and partners to sort of think of all those implications, and what sort of audience they are they're drawing there.
Yeah, because at the same time, I feel like something we're starting to see. We've always seen it, but I feel like I don't know. We talk to enterprises all the time here at Myson as well, and you've been involved in some of those conversations, Alex. But some of the people I talk to, it's they'll ask me about like, what about Clayton? What about Luxo? Like these private corporate blockchains. Do we think those are going to last? Number one, do we think they're a good idea? Like, what do we think about? I guess private versus public blockchains, right? And how brands can, think about those, I guess, depending on who you are.
I think there are always exceptions to the rule, but I think generally, you know, the magic of blockchains come from them being open and permissionless and interoperable, and you're losing a lot of that when you make private blockchains the strategy. But again, there are exceptions to that for sure, and I've seen some models where maybe it makes sense, but generally, I think that for most use cases, private blockchains are just shittier databases, and it's kind of missing the whole point there.
My hope is, I think we're seeing it right now with a lot of the chains, right? Is what was it like with Eclipse? Now we're getting the Solana virtual machine connected to Ethereum. We have uh, A Star moving from Polkadot to like everything. All roads seem to lead back to ETH. So I am interested to see in the next couple of years, are we going to see these blockchains either shut down, grow, or maybe even port over? Um, like we even just saw JP Morgan, right? They just launched their private chain, JPM coin or whatever, and it's a private blockchain. But who knows? Maybe in a couple of years they'll port on over.
Yeah. Like I said, there's always exceptions and use cases where it does make a ton of sense. I remember,
Yeah,
when Hyperledger and enterprise blockchains were like the thing, and then we sort of learned that those like private blockchains maybe aren't really the way forward, and that you're better off being on maybe on mainnet using zk stuff to try to like abstract away sensitive information because you don't want sensitive enterprise data on chain. But maybe there are some use cases where your company has a franchise model where they all roll up in some way to it's like a broader entity, and it makes sense for them to want to share information in that way. But yeah.
I agree. But as a someone who loves the, I'm not a purist, but I do love public blockchains. It's like you could deploy it as a supernet or on Polygon or a subnet on Avalanche, and yeah,
A lot more options
yeah.
nowadays, with being able to still keep things on a public chain without exposing sensitive data for sure.
And now Aztec is implementing their layer two, right, which will be completely privacy focused. So I feel like, man, and even just the past year and a year plus that you and I have been working together, like this is everything moves so quick. It's hard to keep track of everything, and the developments keep happening. So it's just like we're witness and participating in this brand new space. Um, Okay, so another question. So something I've heard when we talk to enterprise companies, right, or brands that are curious, oftentimes it's a CMO, head of innovation, that's interested and is curious about how they can use Web3. But from my own experience, it seems like the challenge or the hurdle that so many brands have is it's more like the C-suite or the chief financial officer who doesn't seem to understand what's the immediate ROI from this, right? Like, how do we make money off this today? Um, if someone were to ask you that, right, whether or not you're at PUMA, right? Let's say you go to another company and you're pitching the CMO or the CFO, I guess in this case, like, how would you make that case for Web3, at least being experimented, tested, implemented in whatever form it is? What's the business case?
Yeah, well, I think there's plenty of rationale for why a brand should move forward with Web3, even if you don't see like direct ROI on a transaction by transaction basis. If there's not like a clear cash on cash return there, um, I mean, one reason is just to future proof yourself. Like, I think every brand should allocate some budgets to testing new ideas and new technologies and seeing what works and what sticks and what aligns with their business naturally and authentically. So sometimes it's just about taking risks and trying something that you're not familiar with and seeing if it pans out into something. So there is definitely a level of risk taking there because there is uncertainty in the space. but also I think it's more so about creating a longer term relationship with your customers. Um, so you might not have the margin that you're used to on an initial sale or see like immediate returns from it. But I think the idea is that if you're building a more direct and meaningful relationship with your consumers, they're more likely to become a long-term, lifelong consumer. So you're increasing that customer lifetime value, even if maybe you're not seeing an immediate ROI in the next year or 5 years, even.
I love that. Yeah, and actually, I would add on to that, which is all that, and then I think it's this reality of like we seem to live in a world that, well, we do live in a world that's like more and more hyper fragmented, right? So it's like unlimited brands. Anyone can spin up a brand on the internet. Anyone can grow a brand out of nowhere. So in a hyper competitive, cutthroat world, everything you're saying matters even more, right? Is this idea of loyalty and LTV? Um, that only becomes more and more important as the competition gets more and more fierce, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, defense is a legitimate strategy for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, I'd love to also learn. Let's also talk about Innovation Guild, right? Myosin stuff, the cool stuff we're doing together there. Could you tell us a bit more about kind of Innovation Guild, your role there, and how that's what we're up to, I guess, while we're continuing to build in the bear.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been great working on Innovation Guild alongside you and Sam and some others for a while now. And we really like to see it act as like the tip of the spear for Myosin in a couple of ways. One being our strategic consulting arm for Myosin, for both like enterprise traditional brands and Web 2 looking to enter Web 3 or emerging marketing technology in general, as well as Web3 native companies. And then, in addition to that, it's a great group of really sharp strategists that can help to build out Myosin's internal strategy as well, and figuring out where we're going to market and how we're executing those things.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I mean, I'd be like, well, you should tell some of the folks about the research reports. I think I don't know that we're putting together, but we'll come out with those soon enough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, we have some really big brain people in Myosin. It's super refreshing to work with these folks, and that the type of content and research that we're able to put together is really top notch. So I'm excited to see as we continue to publish some of these vertical specific research reports on how these industries can be disrupted by and benefit from emerging technologies like Web 3 and consumer facing AI.
it's coming, man. It's coming. And so actually, that was a good point, which I don't. We didn't really touch AI at all, right? So maybe we should touch that very quickly. Like, we have some thoughts on that, but we'd love to get your take on, right, like the intersection, because, right, as we all know, Web3 was the hot thing for the past 2-3 years, and then now with ChatGPT last year, and then last year, beginning of this year, it just blew up, and everyone's that's all they're talking about. So would be curious to kind of get, again, your take on where's the intersection there, what does that look like, and how should brands be thinking about all that?
I think there's a lot of intersection for sure. I'd say one primary area that I think is interesting is as AI becomes more and more prevalent in our lives, we're going to see more and more iterations of the same thing, like duplicates and potentially fakes. Some of them malicious, some of them not. And I think then more than ever, it's going to be important to be able to validate the authenticity and the original source of something, which obviously blockchains are a great use for. So I think that blockchains will come in handy quite well from that perspective. Um, I also think that AI can work really well with community at large as a collaborative tool. So when we talk about Web3 and blockchain enabling this one-to-one direct community relationship, I also think that's AI, especially some of this generative stuff that we're seeing with large language models and visual arts, can lend a hand in co-creation of different assets and creative output as well.
What are some of the coolest examples that you're seeing today in terms of, whether it's AI? Well, I guess let's stick to that right now, right? Like AI, and then ideally like the intersection of those two things.
Yeah, I mean on the pure AI part. I just saw a couple examples this week, really clean examples of like very low lift audio translation to a different language. So someone recording a podcast in English and it automatically being translated in the original person's voice into a bunch of different languages.
We gotta try that.
Yeah. Seriously, because it worked really really well, and from what I could tell, there wasn't too much like fine tuning in post from humans. So I think that like that's a really interesting space for sure. And then and like I said, like the co-creation, being able to use like tokenized communities in collaboration with AI to continue like fine tuning a certain taste or vibe or like mood board to create a physical product or a digital product, and having like constant human feedback between tokenized communities using their tokens to vote on things, and having that relationship back and forth between an AI to create like an end result that represents really what the entire community wants. Because like alternatively, if you did have an example where there was an opportunity for a digital creative assets to be created and you wanted to get a NFT community's input, that would be super chaotic to try to just use like Discord, like upvotes, um, to manage all that between them and like an artist or like a group of artists to try to iterate back and forth between what the community wants and what the artist's vision is. That would take forever. But if you have some sort of AI model, so maybe stable diffusion model or something like that, that can continue to generate creative assets, bring them back to the tokenized community, they vote on what they like about it, different changes, send that immediately back to the AI to make those changes and keep iterating on that process. That's something that would be uh, like super super difficult and laborious for a human to do.
Yeah, yeah. We need the machines to help out, right? It's there's only so much. Well, and kind of bring it back to what you were saying earlier, right? I think what AI is enabling is personalized experiences at scale, right? So it's one to many, but it's kind of like simulating many to many, I guess, right? You're creating those connections using technology to get there, and then ideally, like you're talking about, using blockchain to back it up and verify that things are real. Um, so it's exciting stuff, man. Here's another thing, right? So I kind of implied, I already kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to circle back to it, which is, I think right now we're in such an interesting space. And I'd be curious, like for you as someone who kind of sits on the brand side now, right? Thinking about, there's so many competitors all building similar things, whether it's wallets, blockchains, infra, tokenized loyalty. Like, where does this all end up, right? Do you think it's going to be, there's just going to be a couple winners and it becomes another centralized thing? Do you think we all just stay fragmented and then there's some middle layer that comes in and then we all kind of participate together? I love these like mind game, or like these, simulations, right? And it's playing out what might happen.
I mean, I think like always, relationships play a huge role there. So having that trust from someone in the market to help cut through the noise, because there are so many products and so many platforms and tools that brands can leverage or individuals can leverage in the Web3 space, and it can be difficult to cut through that noise. So definitely having relationships where you can trust the work that someone's done, I think is a huge benefit, and I think that Myosin plays a really great role in acting as that trusted advisor or strategic consultants to help guide brands or individuals through like their Web3 journey and help them sort of decipher like what platforms and projects make sense to do collaborations with, like what sort of like ethos and vibes make sense for two different entities to work on, and what tools make more sense or what chain to deploy on. It can be really difficult to figure that stuff out, and having a group like Myosin and the work that we do there, I mean, you and I have seen has been super beneficial to the groups that we work
Yeah.
with.
We're agnostic, and I appreciate the shout out. Yeah, I think, something I like to drive home always, like when we talk to people, is like, for us, all we care about is like net new wallets, right? We care about adoption of this technology and helping make the world a better place for it, right? And so we can work with any blockchain, any provider, and we're happy to kind of partner up as appropriate, because at the end of the day, like, different needs, different brands, different requirements, we can end up becoming that middle layer, that implementation layer that combines both sides. So
And you just made me think of something when you said being focused on net new wallets, because totally aligned there. But that also made me think about the user experience and having to interact with wallets or technology in general. And just something I've been thinking about more and more recently is that I really think that traditional legacy brands entering and participating in this space are really some of like the primary groups that are driving innovation generally in crypto, because more than anyone, our audiences demand smooth user experiences. And if we're going to enter the Web3 space, we have a lot more pressure and a lot more immediate demand to provide a seamless user experience versus crypto native companies selling to crypto native users. They're willing to accept a lot more technical hoops to jump through, and that's just sort of the standard, and it's accepted. But brands are on the front lines, and it
yeah,
shouldn't be. And brands see that every day, and they're on the front lines of interacting with people who are not going to accept a clunky user experience. And so then the cycle happens of brands enforcing that with technology providers to create new products that are easy to use. And I think it's a really interesting cycle that gets created when large brands enter the space.
that's what we need. 100%. It's just like, I mean, I wish I could like put stars on that, because like I think that's the key, right? Is like, even for someone like me, I've been degenning. I've been loosely involved for a couple cycles now, but I really started getting into this in just the past couple of years. And even then, a new chain launches and like, oh, you got to bridge your tokens to this thing, and you got to. And I'm like, wait, so I gotta like I have to figure out how much ETH I want to move to this chain, and I gotta like convert it. Then I gotta use it, but then it just sits there. It's fragmented across a billion different things. So exactly what you're talking about, right? Is um, at the end of the day, it's about net new wallets. It's not about us just like selling to a bunch of other degens, and that's just like this endless cycle, right? Of just degens selling to degens. So I'm actually curious, like, well, it's more an observation than anything. It's something I've been thinking about a lot as well, which is like the idea of the email address becoming, it's kind of like our phone number, right? We're at this point in time where, I don't know, when was the last time you changed your phone number? For me, it's I've had mine since I was like 12, right? So I've had the same phone number for 18 plus years. And yeah, and my emails, I still have mine from when I was 6, and I have my Gmail, of course, right? But it's this idea of, I think, like most, and I'm curious to get your take on this, but it seems like most of the enterprise brands that we've talked to, most of the wallets, the service providers that we've talked to, it's like email is becoming it's the gate, right? Just like you would do single sign on in a traditional Web 2. So even if we're using Web 3 Rails, it's still email is like that's your key to everything. I don't know. Do you feel like that's where it's going to keep going, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I do, at least for a little while. Again, you have to meet people where they're at. It's like entirely unreasonable to expect someone to download MetaMask and use it responsibly when they are just entering the space and have no desire to get into crypto or Web3. They just want to engage with the brands. That's not realistic to ask them to do that. And there's always a cost to doing everything. You're always going to sacrifice something somewhere. Between scalability and security and user experience. And I think that more and more we are finding those sweet spots. And those sweet spots change depending on the consumer too. Everyone has their preferences and their priority, and the stakes are higher and lower for different types of people depending on the kind of activity they're engaging in. Someone who's just using, a wallet that was attached to their email address where they signed up for a membership with a brand maybe doesn't have to be so paranoid about where they distribute their seed phrase, or getting a safe deposit box for the 20 points that they have for a free burrito or something versus some uh, big Bitcoin whale.
Well, and actually, that kind of leads me to a different. There's a couple different thoughts here, but I'm curious about. I feel like something we talk about, and this is maybe going down a more Web3 native route than only enterprise and brand, but I'm curious on your thoughts around like this idea of decentralized identity, right? It's a big idea of like, oh, you can own your data and you can monetize it, but I feel like that comes to life in so many different forms. So I don't know. I guess it's more just like, where do you think that's headed as well? Like, does decentralized identity come from, when we create identities with brands and we're going to port that over to all the other brands, or is it going to come from we're going to create wallets outside of the brands and then we port it into, it's a big hairy question. So there's no right or wrong answers, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts there.
I always lean towards like a personal preference of like conditional sharing of data. So my preference would be that the default is that my data is not shared unless immediately relevant to the activity that I'm looking to engage in, and at that point I can opt into it. But I don't think the default should be to overshare. If I need to, just like simple use cases, like if I need to buy alcohol, they need to know one thing: am I old enough to buy alcohol? In theory, they don't need to know all my other demographic information. Not that uh, there's like a ton of implications maybe in a store of that, but you can see other situations where maybe there are negative implications of sharing data that's not relevant to that, where the end user does get the short end of the stick.
And that's what ZKs are, zero knowledge proofs, right? I think those will, it's so funny again, like how quickly this space moves. I feel like, we've known about ZKs for a long time, but it wasn't until this year that they really started to come to life. And I think now everyone's realizing, oh, like you can have the benefits of public blockchain while still keeping some things private. Um, so I'm really excited for what's going to come there.
Lots of cool companies in the ZK and the identity space in general. We'll see where it turns out, but there's so much cool stuff happening there.
We'll find out. We'll find out. And actually, that leads me to my next question. Outside of Web3 AI, right? We're entering this kind of exponential age where everything moves quicker, everything the timelines are compressed, etc. But outside of these Web3 and AI, like what are the other things that really get you excited, especially from like a more, I guess, consumer facing point of view in terms of the technologies that I think they're going to really help usher in this kind of direct to community future and change how we all interact. Curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so much going on all the time. It is such an interesting time to be alive and to be like a person working in technology broadly. There's just so much cool stuff happening, and it's like every day it feels like there's another cool sub industry to focus on and to go all in on. Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously the developments in AI recently are just getting crazier and crazier, and it does not feel like that growth is linear. It definitely feels like it's exponential. I don't know if there's a cap to that exponential growth where then we will start to just grow more linearly. Like the developments in gaming because of that, the implications of using AI for video game developments, and like more, in general, more broadly, like visual production, be like video, or music even. All that stuff is super crazy. And then outside of that and Web3 related things, I think we're seeing 3D printing getting a lot better, a lot faster, which I think has cool implications. Um, and I think that we are seeing um, more legitimate and accessible use cases for mixed reality. Obviously, there are some of the major players that have been in that space for a while, but now we're seeing more technology companies entering that VR, AR space. And I think there's a ton of unlock, especially for AR stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, what do you think of Apple Vision Pro? Right, like that was a pretty incredible commercial they had.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the stuff is cool. I'm excited to see like what adoption looks like, and when we hit that point of like that comfort level with throwing on a headset. again, going back to those like user experience sweet spots, like what is that kind of perfect like sizing or weights or ability to like hop in and out that we need to see for those really to take off with mass adoption.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is it's always the hype cycle, right? Like we always think something's going to happen a bit faster than we think it does, and then it doesn't happen, and then all of a sudden it just happens, right? Like ChatGPT, we've all known about AI for a long time. We've known about like, oh, AI is coming, and then came out of nowhere, and we're like, what the hell happened? And the whole world blew up, right? So it'll be interesting. Like maybe it won't be Apple Vision Pro, maybe it'll be the next one, maybe it'll be the one after that. But I agree. I think at some point it'll hit, and then the world's going to change again. It's like these step functions, right? So it's just like gradual. It's just
Yeah, it's like that saying, like slowly
yeah,
then all at once.
exactly. So we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. Cool. And so one last thing before we move to rapid fire is there, what are you excited for, I guess, to see come out next for whether it's for PUMA, Innovation Guild, whatever you can disclose, talk about that people should, our listeners should get excited for.
Yeah, I mean, regarding Innovation Guild and Myosin, definitely excited for those research reports that I mentioned earlier to come out. I think those are going to be really, really cool, really, really valuable, and just something that's needed in this space. So really looking forward to that. And then like regarding Web3 more broadly in like apparel and brands, um, just interested to see like how brands continue to engage in this space while we're, at least for now, in this bear market, because it seems like we're seeing more and more brands decide to enter it now or double down on their bets now and not leave. Obviously, there have been the brands that have backed off and left the space, but we're seeing massive brands continue to enter the space like in the cold winter of the bear markets. And I think that's a really interesting signal to be looking for.
Okay. There's some coded alpha there. Yeah, be wary. There are more folks entering the space.
They're making these decisions for a reason. So there was a lot of hype, a lot of speculation that built up the bull market with NFTs. But there's obviously some real underlying value there that's smart people are recognizing and deciding to take advantage of. I think we're growing past the phase of the idea being to buy and sell NFTs, and instead of that, being focused on using NFTs.
Yeah, Web3 is infrastructure, which, to be frank, it always has been, right? We're just now unlocking the reality of what it can do for people.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to beat a user experience of profit. That definitely was a compelling one for a lot of people. Profit is a delightful user experience that people enjoyed, and there was plenty of it to be had, but plenty of losses to be had as well. So I'm excited to see this next iteration of using Web3.
Yeah, it's we call it consumer crypto, right? Although maybe we got to take the crypto term out of it, but consumer blockchain.
I always go back and forth on the idea of how much of the terminology and technology do we want to abstract away, because like I mentioned before, it's not reasonable to expect someone who is not interested in crypto to have to engage with some of these practices that more native people are familiar with. But at the same time, I do think there is like some special inherent value in the technology itself that is more value driven than maybe previous iterations of the internet. And maybe it's important to not forget those elements. And it may be the case that those like intrinsic values are inherent to the appeal and usage. Like you can't just ignore the fact that that it is backed by a blockchain. Maybe that should be right front and center because it is important. So it'll be interesting to see how the market decides how important that stuff is.
Yeah, yeah. My take on that, just like a bit of a gem on that, is I think it'll be a situation in which it's like both can coexist. Basically, I think what'll probably happen. My bet here would be that I think as time goes on, as more and more brands, as you just implied, and as we all know, are starting to onboard into Web3 because they recognize this is the future of, brand loyalty, consumer engagement, retention, driving value to, I mean, if that's what you care about, the shareholders, right? Which is what these more public enterprise companies care about, and investors, right? But at the same time, I think as the net new wallets start to be created, I'm sure, that's how people go down the rabbit hole, right? Like you start to go down this thing and you're like, wow, this thing's cool. And then they start to interact with more and more kind of like crypto, degen things, right? So I think there will always be like on the fringes, or in some other part of the internet, this like Web3 native universe ecosystem, right? It'll always be smaller, I think, in the long term to like consumer crypto, but I'm sure it'll always still be there, and there will always be a bit of like that osmosis and transfer between the two.
I completely agree. Like I mentioned before, that trilemma issue between security, scalability, and usability is not like an objective static thing that is just like the universal truth for everyone using crypto. It's dynamic and flexible, dependent on the person engaging in those products and what type of activity they are engaging in. Security is much more important for some use cases than others. It's always important, but some situations have more gravity in one of those areas than the other. So there are some instances where user experience really does need to be optimized, and the others are able to take a backseat because the consequences of losing stuff are not that great. But the consequences of user experience not being great is that it just never gets used in the first place. So it's a
That
dynamic
just dies.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the world we live in. We're building ecosystems. We're building universes. Everyone has a role to play. Cool. Well, let's move into rapid fire questions. So this one's pretty straightforward. We do it every episode of past season, and we're going to keep doing it. And we actually have, we like the questions, so we haven't really even changed it that much. But number one, if pick one project, whether in Web3, AI, emerging tech as a whole, not including your own, not something you're directly involved with, that you're most bullish on.
Mm. Okay.
Don't think too long. That's why it's rapid fire.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Then I'm just going to go with the tried and true Ethereum. I am, I'm just as bullish as ever, and I'm excited to see that
Okay.
ecosystem continue to build out more and more and become more usable for people.
Well, I was gonna say, can you elaborate on that? Like outside of, I mean, that's a pretty that's a tried and true. So you got to give some more details in that case.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I was saying, there are so many people in this space working on and contributing to Ethereum, whether like directly or to the broader ecosystem. So it's just really interesting to see like what the output of all that talent is. Like some of the smartest people in the world are putting their time into this, and I think the results that we see from that are just really, really, really cool stuff.
I totally agree with that actually. Just like throwing my 2 cents in the ring there, right? Like I actually had this conversation when we were in Asia for Token and 2049 and Korea Blockchain Week. We had this conversation a lot, which is, I mean, ETH is, if they haven't already won the game, like they're already the market leader. The L2s are picking up, right? People who aren't Ethereum L2s are becoming Ethereum L2s. And I think the anecdotal story I use all the time is my ex girlfriend. She, a year and a half ago, I think, became a software engineer. And I've been shilling her blockchain for years. And eventually she's like, okay, for my coding, like one of my projects, I'm going to do a blockchain thing. What did she learn? She learned Solidity, of course, because if anyone wants to learn blockchain, you're going to Google it, and then Solidity is going to be the first thing that pops up, right? So the network effect is already kicking in, where people who enter the space, it's the first thing, So we'll see what happens, but and there'll be like fast followers and there'll be others, but I think Ethereum they're too deeply seated, and everything you're talking about, right? Is there's so many people already in it, some brilliant names and minds working on it, like How could you bet against it?
Yeah, and to to clarify, I wouldn't consider myself a maximalist or dedicated to any single chain at all. But if you're gonna ask me, my favorite project, I gotta give it up to ETH. Just I mean, seeing some of the I think like hackathons are really important, just specifically for that reason of like focused hackathons on different projects and on different chains. So I think the output of all those are great, but just firsthand, especially bringing back ETH Boston hackathon this past April, seeing the participants in that hackathon and the projects that came out of that. Again, in the dark of a bear market, just got me really inspired and excited for all the things that are being built in the space and specifically on Ethereum.
It's incredible. And also, yes, disclaimer on my end as well. Love Soul, going to Breakpoint. We love AVAX. We love a bunch of the other guys. So just putting that out there as well. All right. Next question. It's one of my favorites. Biggest professional learning over the past 12 months?
I think definitely being flexible and nimble in whatever you decide to do in your career or whatever you think that you're deciding to do, because things can change so quickly, um, and really easily, just dependent on a few conversations. I mean, most of the major career changes or life changes that have come to me over the years um, have been from what seemingly was happenstance, or just putting yourself out there in one small way that just trickled into something much larger. So yeah, being open and being flexible to trying new things, and I'm always pro interaction. Like whenever there's a decision whether to interact or not interact, I'd say do it. Say engage with that person. Not all interactions end up being positive, but I think on the aggregates, like more activity, more human to human interactions you have net out to be to be positive and allows for more options for you. And as long as you can stay flexible, and that's the world is your oyster with all those choices.
I love it, man. You're creating your own destiny. It's a nice yes and type philosophy. It's great.
I'll just add, especially today, with how quickly things move and how much crossover there is between technologies. Yeah, there's so much opportunity to play and to play with the things that interest you at the time. And that's not to say to just jump to the next thing, but find out like why something that you're interested in makes sense long term, and just do it.
Yeah, that's really sage advice. And I think that's the cool part is like, especially within our world, even like with Web3 or emerging tech or brands doing emerging tech or innovation, like it's such a small world. So it's kind of like just the more people you meet with, the more people you interact with, and like, send good vibes and good work into the ether, right? Like it generally does come back. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I love being able to
Yeah.
look back a year and just thinking how surprised that version of yourself would be if they saw you today. And not that you've had to have like accomplished so much over 12 months, but just how things ended up shaking out. It's like you could never predict some of these things, especially if you're allowing for more variables to enter your life. And I think, yeah, human interaction are one of like the most interesting variables that you can input into your life. Like the and I'll just stress like in real life stuff too. Like the local community here in crypto in Boston has been great for me. It really does truly feel like a sense of community, especially in the Boston DAO, and just meeting all those people, and meeting new people every month and seeing why people are there every month, how they got into the space, what's interesting to them. It's just like refreshing and inspiring every single time.
I'm into it, man. I'm into it. And you've sent a huge amount of quality, members, leads, folks. It all makes sense, right? Because you're just out there doing the hard work of just putting yourself in the universe and interacting with people. And we need more of that, honestly. So God bless you. Yeah, we're doing cool stuff. All right, last two questions, and then we're gonna wrap it up. If you had $1 million today, someone you get it wired into your bank account or airdropped into your personal wallet, what would you go build today? in emerging tech. And again, this is assuming you can't do anything related to PUMA, Myosin, or any of that.
Okay, but has to be in emerging tech.
Yes, but I'm open to if it's not.
I'll give my not
yeah.
answer, which hopefully does not offend crypto people, but just has been something that's on my mind more recently. Um, and again, definitely not financial advice. I really have no fundamental understanding of why this would be a good financial decision. It's just something that I am personally interested in and wants to do. I love to focus more on real estate stuff. For me, there's just again, there's something so nice about the physical world sometimes, especially when so much of your world is the digital. Um, there's something just so satisfying about the idea of brick and mortar and cash flow too. I think cash flow becomes extremely attractive, any cash flowing business model when you're in this space. So on the non emerging tech side,
when you say real estate, though, like you would go buy and you're going to do the whole landlord flipping houses thing, or
I love to do like multifamily stuff.
I mean, me too. Honestly, you're not. Everything you're saying resonates. I feel like the deeper I go into Web3 and all the tech stuff, the more I'm like, I would like to just buy a home upstate and just like be in the woods all day. Like
on the emerging tech side, I mean, I'm just going to answer this based off of a singular talk that I heard at this Boston blockchain conference last week. It hasn't necessarily been on my minds, but it was a really interesting talk by I believe it's Groma Corp, which is a Boston-based prop tech company that's doing real estate and blockchain stuff.
there we
go. So yeah, really interesting stuff.
Titles on the blockchain.
I mean, yeah, that's such a complicated space. It's like two industries that each have so much regulation, and at times so much volatility. But there's just some really interesting concepts around like staking and being able to instead of if you're a renter, like some advantages that it can bring to you as a renter of being able to take a loan out from an entity to pay your mortgage or to pay your rent rather, and then buy tokens that represents a REIT, which is a real estate investment trust. So that REIT represents ownership shares in like a cash flowing real estate business. And the idea would be that yes, you'd be paying interest on the debt you took out to pay like the $2,000 rent or whatever, but the dividends from the REIT combined with the appreciation that it sees would net you positive. So say the interest rate on the loan is 8%, but maybe your dividends on that $2,000 per month end up being more. I don't know if those economics end up working out in reality. It was a really intriguing talk. So I guess yeah.
There we go. Yeah, you got a nice little plug. Send me the link. I'll drop them in the show notes. Yeah. It'll be fun. Yeah, I think prop tech is such a. I mean, it's so like right before my I don't think I ever told you this. When I was at Human Ventures, like 2018, what the last company we built right before I left was focused on title insurance. So it was kind of like streamlining the whole like home closing process because it was super like antiquated, super manual. We went deep into title. That is a really antiquated industry. Number one, it's like not digitized, and then it's a monopoly. It's like it's a cobble. Like the way they're like working to like, it's not a world I want to get into. But I do think there's real opportunity with tokenized real estate. There's a lot of stuff there, but we'll see what happens. That's cool though. That's cool. Last thing, and this one is just pure fun, but craziest predictions in Web3, AI, emerging tech as a whole by, let's say, end of year this year. So in the next, end of September here. So next 3 months, do you think anything crazy is going to happen?
Okay, yeah, in the AI space, I think we obviously saw like a huge boost in usage of ChatGPT when it first came out, and I think this might not even be accurate, but just my gut intuition is that maybe there's been a decline in daily usage.
I saw a graph the other day. It's slowly dropping.
Yeah. So I will think that in the next 3 months that will pick up a little bit again, maybe not maybe not to levels previously seen, but There are some developments that seem to be coming to markets on the app side by OpenAI and others that's maybe will make it more useful to use on your day-to-day life. So I think probably more daily usage of LLMs by like average regular people, um, and then more enterprise adoption of that stuff as well. I think makes sense. I think uh, more like enterprise solutions are probably being like built out and will be enterprise ready, in the coming quarter. So I think, yeah, we'll see a lot more there. And then on the Web3 side of things, I don't know what like the crypto market looks like in the next 3 months or next 3 years at all.
But it could be on the brand side, it could be on the builder side, it could be, it doesn't have to be just, we're not asking for price predictions here, right? This is more just like, you never know what could happen. It could be Binance goes, they get convicted. I don't know. Yeah, there's a billion different things that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just more, again, more enterprise adoption. For sure. It's not really a crazy prediction, but I feel pretty strongly about that. I think there's like awesome implications of that. So maybe not a crazy prediction, but I will title it an awesome prediction because the results will be awesome if that happens.
I'm into it, man. I'm into it. Yeah. And honestly, that's what we need, right? Because I tell people all the time, it's like you onboard one enterprise, that could be 1 million, 5 million, 10 million. It could be millions of users, just one deal versus trying to like convince all these people with bad UX and UI that, frankly speaking, like crypto just doesn't, it's just not up to snuff yet, right? So start the enterprise onboard, and then maybe we'll eventually close the gap, right, between mainstream consumer or mainstream crypto and then degen crypto, I guess, or however you want to describe it.
And I will
One
predict
day.
also that
Yeah.
Web3 gaming finds its footing
Yes.
as well. Obviously, a lot of the models are just absolute trash, and just it doesn't work out the play to earn stuff. But I think that that space will find its footing, and the user experience will get better, and the games will just be enjoyable, and more Web3 components will be integrated into existing games. And I think that's just a super interesting space because the gaming industry is just so big.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. And I can also back that up because having just spent 2 weeks in Asia talking to all these different blockchains and gaming companies and company, like they're all, Asia's fully on board. So I think that's another thing to maybe reiterate to all of our listeners is, however things may feel in the US or the West in general, because of, the regulatory environment, especially in the US, is not the best. In Asia and other parts of the world, they are moving full steam ahead. That was my key takeaway from being there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's the sentiment I've been feeling as well. Is that that those markets are much more comfortable with the idea of Web3 gaming than we are here in the US or in the West in general. They're just more familiar with that gamification aspect already being in games. That's the idea of like Web3 components doesn't feel as foreign or odd to them as maybe US gamers are put off by it. So yeah,
It's coming. It's coming. And it's soft shell, actually. That's why we're launching Myo.GG, which is our gaming division. But you'll hear more about that on our website and Twitter. Cool. Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much it for today. So I guess the last thing is, Alex, if you could please show yourself. So where can listeners find you and all the cool stuff you're doing?
Yeah, I am on chain Alex everywhere. Twitter, Discord, Telegram. That's where you can find me and hit me up if you want to chat.
All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Cool. Well, listen, this was really fun, man. Thanks for coming on, talking about brands, PUMA, Myosin, innovation, all the fun stuff. Really excited to get this published out the door, episode 1 for the new season of Etc. in the books. And yeah, really appreciate it. So, all right. Ciao. We hope you enjoyed this episode in etc. If you'd like to learn more about marketing and innovation in emerging tech, please visit www.myosin.xyz and subscribe to our newsletter at www.netcetera.media to get started. And if you're a fan of the show, please show your support by subscribing and leaving a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.